Hi, this is Mrs. Kidman, and in this video, we're going to be talking about how we can write equations in slope-intercept form. So as a reminder, slope-intercept form is another way of saying y equals mx plus b, right? So we're going to be writing equations here in the form of y equals mx plus b. Now, what do we need in order to write something in slope-intercept form? Well, the name gives it away. We need to know the slope. We also need to know the intercept. So our slope here is going to be our m. So whatever our slope is, we can get our m from that. Now, sometimes our slope's going to be given to us. Sometimes we're going to have to calculate it. If we need to calculate our slope, what we're going to do is we're going to use our y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 if they give us 2 points. Our other piece of our slope-intercept form is our intercept. Now, this isn't any intercept, but this is our y-intercept. And we are going to put our y-intercept where our b value is here. And we can actually use our slope and our y-intercept to calculate these different things here. So anytime we're writing in slope-intercept form, we need two things. We need to know our slope and we need to know our y-intercept. And if we aren't given those, we're going to have to find them somehow. So we're going to go through a couple different ways that we can write equations in slope-intercept form. Sometimes it's going to be given the slope and intercept. Sometimes it's going to be given the slope and another point. Sometimes it's going to be given two different points. And we've got lots of different ways to look at this. So let's start by writing an equation for the line in slope-intercept form given the slope and the y-intercept. Now, we talked about how m is the same thing as our slope and b is the same thing as our y-intercept. So what we can do here is we can actually just substitute in our slope and our y-intercept for m and b respectively, and we'll be able to find that. So in this case, we would have y equals our slope, which is negative 3x, plus our y-intercept, which is 1/2. And that's it. When they give us our slope and our y-intercept, it is so easy for us to write this equation here. Now, what if that's not what they give us? What if we end up getting an equation in a graph? Well, if they give us a graph, we still need the same two things. We still need to figure out our slope and we need to figure out what our y-intercept is. So our y-intercept, remember what that y-intercept means is it's where it crosses our y-axis on our graph. So when they give us a graph, it's really easy to find because we can look at our y-axis here and we can see that it crosses right here at -3. So our y-intercept in this graph is going to be -3. Then what if we needed to find our slope? Well, to find our slope, we can count it. Remember, slope is the same thing as our rise over our run, or in other words, our change in our y value over the change in x. So what we can do is, given these 2 points here on our graph, we can either calculate it using that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, or we can just count our slope. And that's what I'm going to do here is just count it. So we can count it from this starting point here up to our other point in green here by looking at how far it moves up and how far it moves over. So we've got an up of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So our slope is going to be a rise of 6 over 4, which ends up simplifying down to 3 over 2. So we've got a slope of 3/2 and we've got a y-intercept of -3. So now that we have our slope and our y-intercept, we can write it in slope-intercept form. This is going to be y equals 3/2 x minus 3. Beautiful. Okay, so we've done it. If they give us our slope and our intercept, if they give us a line, like a graph of a line, we can write it. What if they happen to give us 2 different points? How can we write it in slope-intercept form if they give us 2 different points? Well, there's a couple of different ways that we can look at it, and it really depends on the points. If we're given 2 points, we need to find our slope and we need to find our y-intercept. Now, when it comes to finding our y-intercept, remember our y-intercept is when our x value is 0. So that means it's always going to be in the form 0, something. Now, if one of our points happens to be that, like we can see in this case, we have this point 0, -1, that means that our y-intercept is going to be that -1 value. However, we may run into problems where we don't have it, and we'll talk about how to solve those. But in this case, we got lucky and they gave us our y-intercept as one of our points, but we still have to find our slope. So remember how we talked about if we can't just count the slope or we're not given the slope, how there's a way to calculate it, that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1? Well, that's exactly what we want to do here. We want to use that. So we've got our x1, our y1, our x2, and our y2, and we want to plug those in. So I've got -1 minus 5 over 0 minus -3. Now remember, we are subtracting that negative here, so we want to switch it to a plus. And then we can go through and finish this here. We get a -6 over 3, which ends up equaling -2. So if I have my slope and my y-intercept, how can we write this? Well, we can just plug those in. So y equals -2x minus 1. Beautiful. Now this one worked out great. We talked about how one of our points is actually our y-intercept. Fantastic. Now what do we do if we end up with a problem where it's not in there? So what if we were given 2 points And the points that we were given here ended up being the points 3, 2, and the points 7, 5. What are we going to do then? Well, we can actually still find the equation of the line in slope-intercept form given just these 2 points here. Now, what we need to do is we still need to find those 2 things. We need to find our slope and we need to find our y-intercept. Now, in this case, these are both going to require some calculations for us. To find that slope, we are still going to use that y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So let's go ahead and start there. We've got x1, y1, x2, y2. We can go through and calculate this here by doing 5 minus 2 over 7 minus 3. And this ends up giving us 3 over 4. So our slope is 3/4. Fantastic. Now to find our y-intercept, what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this idea of our y equals mx plus b, and we can solve for our b value straight from this. So we know what our slope is, right? So we can write this as y equals our slope of 3/4 x plus our b. We don't know what b is. That's what we're trying to solve for. However, I do know of 2 different points in which I can actually, that will be part of this line, right? We know that 3, 2 is an xy pair that'll be part of this line, and 7, 5 that'll be part of this line. If I put one of those numbers in, if I put a 3 in for x, I should get a 2 out. If I put a 7 in for x, I should get a 5 out. So knowing that these points will make this equation work, I can actually substitute one of my x and y values in for x and y to solve for b. So I'm going to start with our first point here to do this in this case. So we can start with a 2, because that's our y value, equals 3/4 times our x value, which is 3, plus b. And we can actually use this to solve it. So I'm going to do my 3/4 times 3, and we get 2 equals 9/4 plus b. Then I can go on to continue to solve for b. I can subtract my 9/4 from both sides. And in case you forget, 2 is the same thing as 8/4. So 8/4 minus 9/4 will just end up giving us a -1/4. And all that we have left on this side is b. So this actually is another way for us to calculate our y-intercept. So our y-intercept in this case actually ends up being -1/4. So we can write this in slope-intercept form now that we have what b equals, of being y equals our slope of 3/4 x minus our 1/4, which we just calculated using that point there. So it's so awesome. Even if we know just 2 points, we can actually write this in slope-intercept form. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, but this is how we can write equations in slope-intercept form, whether we are given the slope and the intercept, whether we're given a line, whether we're given 2 points, one of which is the intercept, or if we're given 2 points where one is not. So go ahead and get some practice in, but if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thanks.